They say the desert swallows all sound. But that afternoon, it brought voices to his doorstep. 3 years of silence had been his fortress. Each day measured in the creak of wood, the scrape of boots, the slow beating of his own heart. Now, 6 figures knelt at the edge of his fence line, torn dresses fluttering in the dry wind like the wings of dying birds. The youngest looked barely 17, the oldest maybe 25. Their faces were sunken, lips cracked, eyes hollow from miles of running. The one with auburn hair raised her head. Green eyes locked on him, eyes that knew desperation. She opened her mouth, and the sound that came was brittle as dry grass. Whatever had brought them here had cost them dearly. Thaddius Bell's hand tightened on the porch rail. Every instinct told him to retreat. Helping meant pain. He'd learned that the hard way. But when the auburn-haired woman swayed, one hand pressed to her side, he saw the dark stain bloom between her fingers. Fresh blood. Her voice trembled, barely carrying across the dust. "Please, mister, we ain't got nowhere else to go. They're hunting us." The word hunting struck like a match to dry tinder in his chest. Memories came unbidden. Another woman, another plea, another time he'd turned away and lived to regret it. He told her to leave. The words came rough, unused. But even as he said them, his eyes caught the shredded edges of their dresses, the rope burns on their wrists, the bruises in the shapes of hands. They'd been taken, hurt, hunted. And whoever was after them had already caught them once. When she stumbled forward again, blood dripping into the dirt, he moved without thinking, down the porch steps, toward her. He could already hear it now. Hoofbeats, faint but closing fast. She gripped his arm with slick, shaking fingers. Her whisper chilled the heat right out of the air. "They found us. Dear God, they found us." On the horizon, a dust cloud rose. Multiple riders, coming hard. He had less than an hour to decide. Send them away and watch them die, or let them inside and invite hell through his own door. "Get them in," he heard himself say, the words foreign on his tongue. And just like that, the fortress of solitude he'd built for 3 years began to crack. They crossed his yard like women stepping out of a nightmare, limping, holding each other up, eyes darting to the ridgeline where the dust rose higher. Inside his cabin, the sudden presence of 6 strangers made the place feel unbearably small. Clara, the auburn-haired one, pressed harder on her wound, blood seeping through her fingers. Her eyes scanned the room. "You're alone," she said. "By choice." Thaddius answered, already barring the windows. Through the shutters, he could see the dust cloud growing, the riders pushing their horses hard. Whoever they weren't just chasing. They were hunting. "Who are they?" he asked. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper, but the words still made ice settle in his veins. "Slavers. The kind who saw people as livestock. The kind who burn a man's life to the ground if he stood in their way." They crossed his yard like women stepping out of a nightmare, limping, holding each other up, eyes darting to the ridgeline where the dust rose higher. Inside his cabin, the sudden presence of 6 strangers made the place feel unbearably small. Clara, the auburn-haired one, pressed harder on her wound, blood seeping through her fingers. Her eyes scanned the room. "You're alone," she said, By choice, Thaddius answered, already barring the windows. Through the shutters, he could see the dust cloud growing, the riders pushing their horses hard. Whoever they weren't just chasing, they were hunting. Who are they? He asked. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper, but the words still made ice settle in his veins. Slavers. The kind who saw people as livestock. The kind who burn a man's life to the ground if he stood in their way. They stopped just outside Rifle. 6 shadows against the glare of the afternoon sun, dust swirling around their horses' legs. The man in the center sat tall, the glint of his badge. His voice carried clean across the yard. Afternoon, friend. We're looking for some runaway property. 6 women who stole themselves from their rightful owners. You seen anyone like that? Thaddius stepped onto the porch, rifle loose in his grip but ready. Haven't seen anybody. Don't get many visitors out here. Garrett's smile was as cold as a dry winter. That so? Mind if we take a look around? Inside, Thaddius heard the women trying to muffle their breathing. Clara was silent now, likely unconscious from blood loss. The youngest burned with fever. None of them could run. This is private property, Thaddius said, his voice flat. And I don't recall inviting you to search it. Garrett dismounted with predator grace, boots crunching on dry earth. Funny thing about hermits, they usually got secrets. What's yours? The question hung heavy. Thaddius. One of the women let out a soft whimper, but enough to tilt Garrett's head like a wolf catching scent. What was that? Garrett asked. Wind, Thaddius said quickly. Loose board in the roof. But Garrett was already moving toward the porch, hand resting on his pistol. His men followed, dismounting in unison, their steps measured, their eyes cold. Here's what's gonna happen, Garrett said. You're gonna step aside, and we're gonna collect what's ours. Anyone interferes gets buried in the desert. When his hand reached for the cabin door, Thaddius moved. The rifle came, steady, the barrel inches from Garrett's chest. This is private property, he said again, voice like steel. And I meant it. Garrett's eyes narrowed, studying the man behind the rifle. You're making a mistake, friend. A big one. Those women belong to us, bought and paid for. You're interfering with legal commerce. Thaddius gave a bitter laugh. Slavery's been illegal for years. Even out here. Garrett's smile turned predatory. They ain't slaves. They're indentured servants. Signed contracts and everything. From inside, Clara's voice, weak but fierce, cut through the lie. We never signed nothing. He drugged us, took us from a church social in Kansas. Garrett's jaw tightened. Sounds like you got some stolen property in there. Hermit. Property that's making you stupid. The tension stretched. A wire pulled to break it. Thaddius knew the math. 7 guns against 1. 6 women too weak to run. Even if he killed Garrett, the others would cut him down. But sometimes math didn't matter. Sometimes a man had to make a stand. Garrett's gaze sharpened. I think you've been here before. Failed to help someone once. And now you're trying to make up for it. What was her name? Wife? Sister? Daughter? Thaddius's grin tightened. Her name was Sarah. voice broke through from inside. That's him, Thaddius, the man who killed your wife. It was like lightning striking twice. Garrett's smirk deepened. Well, Thaddius Bell, the coward of Willow Creek. But Clara's voice rose, fierce despite the pain. He's lying about her last moments. I was there. Sarah died cursing his name, not calling for you. She believed you'd come. Garrett's hand pushed towards him, but Thaddius was faster. The rifle's roar shattered the thick silence. Wade Garrett flew backward off the porch, across his chest. For a moment, five men drew, fired, shattered windows. Thaddius dove behind the water trough, working the lever with muscle far before. Even if he sped the odds were impossible. Half of them too weak to stand. Clara stood there, dressed soberly, a shotgun braced in steady hands. She fired both barrels of her first rifle, screaming at the top of her lungs. The root cellar! There's more weapons down there, one by one. The other one emerged, rifles, pistols, whatever they could grab. Wounded, exhausted, but eyes blazing with something stronger than fear. They fought like pulling lead into the yard. Spurring their horses, and the sudden chest the man who haunted his nightmares finally dead. Sarah was still gone. Thaddius knelt beside Wade Garrett's body, the sun casting long shadows across the yard. The man who had stolen his wife's last breath would never harm her soul, but the hollow in his chest didn't fit. She'd be proud of him. She'd be proud he finally fought back. Thaddius looked past her. Bruised, but alive. Even the fever-sick girl now stood, swaying, determination burning in her eyes. They felt their freedom, and he had stood with them. He asked Clara. She managed a faint smile. We talked about it while you were playing hero. There's a town 2 territories north. Needs teachers. Good folks. They won't ask questions. Thaddius glanced at the cabin, the place that had been his sanctuary and prison. The silence he'd once treasured now felt like another kind of death. No, he said, the certainty surprising him. I've been alone long enough. The women gathered what little they had. Ahead lay a road no one could predict, but it was a road they'd walk free. And for the first time in years, Thaddius Bell stepped into it with them. And 6 months later, in the territory of New Haven, a one-room schoolhouse stood where an empty field had been. Its walls smelled of fresh pine. Its windows caught the morning light. Thaddius had built it with his own hands, every beam, every desk, every frame crafted with the same care he once used to build the walls around his heart. Clara taught in the mornings, her voice carrying over rows of even young faces. She wore Sarah's as a replacement, but as a bridge between past pain and present hope. The fever-sick girl, Grace, now walked with strength in her stride. She was already known as the finest teacher in 3 territories, her blue eyes holding none of the fear they once did. On quiet evenings, when the sun dipped low and the wind sang across the desert, Thaddius sometimes swore he could hear Sarah's voice. Not in sorrow, not in blame, but in pride. The ranch he'd once seen as a prison was far behind him. Ahead was a town that had welcomed him, and 6 women who'd become more than survivors. They were proof that some battles, no matter how costly, were worth fighting. And as the stars rose over New Haven, Thaddius Bell understood something simple and unshakable. Solitude had kept him alive, but love, loyalty, and courage had finally made him whole. Years later, the desert was still there, unchanged in its vastness, but Thaddius Bell was not the same man who had once hidden from the world. On the porch of the New Haven schoolhouse, he sat in a weathered chair, carving wood as children's laughter floated in from inside. Clara's voice led the lesson, calm and sure. Every so often, one of the older students would slip outside and ask him about the rifle mounted above the door. "Is it true you fought off a gang of slavers?" they'd whisper, wide-eyed. Thaddius would smile faintly, eyes tracing the horizon. "I fought for something worth keeping," he'd say. "That's all that matters." He never told them every detail, how close they'd come to dying, how the fight had cost him pieces of himself he'd never get back. But he told them enough to know that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing when you had every reason to run. And in their eyes, he sometimes saw a flash of Sarah's unyielding spirit and Clara's fierce will to live. As the sun dipped and shadows stretched long over the red earth, Thaddius Bell leaned back, letting the desert wind carry the echoes of the past. Somewhere in that wind, he thought he heard Sarah's voice again. "You kept your promise,"